Has the US finally entered into a buyer's market in which buyers finally have an advantage over home sellers? Well, according to a brand new report from Redfin, that's a possibility because the supply of houses for sale just hit 5.2 months. That's the most since February of 2019. Now, part of the reason why this month supply has been increasing is because houses are taking longer to sell on average. So for example, homes are sitting on the market for 54 days before the seller accepts an offer. That's the longest span since March of 2020. This varies quite a bit depending on the area though, which I'll share with you guys here in a little bit. But we're also going to talk about overall what's happening right now with the US housing market based on this new report from Redfin. And by the way, before we start today's video, I invite you guys to subscribe if you haven't done so already. I post frequent housing market updates so you guys can be more informed. Thank you so much for doing that, and let's begin. So here's this new report from Redfin just posted today. It says the typical home, of course, we're talking about national averages. I'm going to share how each of the metros fares though here in a little bit. The typical home is taking nearly 2 months to sell. That's the slowest pace in about 5 years. There are more than 5 months of supply in the market, the most since early 2019. Homes are taking a long time to sell, largely because housing costs are so expensive. But for buyers who can't afford it, there is a fair amount of houses to choose from due to inventory increasing. They go on to say the following. The typical US home listing, in other words, a home listed for sale, sat on the market for 54 days before this seller accepted an offer. Again, the longest span since March of 2020. And on top of that, that's about 1 week longer compared to the same time frame 1 year ago. Now, this is national trends, right? What if if you're looking to buy a house in Hartford, Connecticut, Austin, Texas, Sacramento, for example, the stats are going to vary quite a bit. So here's what I did for you guys. I found this new article from Realtor.com, actually just posted today as well. They shared the 50 biggest metros, how they fared regarding inventory levels, these other metrics here as well. But let's talk about days in the market, and we're also going to look at inventory numbers. So looking at the increase in days in the market, in other words, it's taking longer to sell compared to 1 year ago. So let me just give you an example. In the Atlanta, Georgia area, it's taking about 10 days longer to sell a house this January compared to January of 2024. Inventory is up by 38%. Now, this is much different compared to other areas in the Northeast, especially. So for example, in Baltimore, Maryland, houses are taking the same time to sell compared to 1 year ago, but inventory is only up by 24%. And by the way, the national average increase days in the market for January compared to the January before that, January of 2024, is 5 days longer. So 5 days on average, it's taking about to sell a house right now. Also, inventory on a national scale is up by 25%. So homes taking about 5 days longer to sell and inventory up by 25%. Just to provide some comparison sake, looking at these stats or these cities. So Baltimore, Maryland, houses taking the same time to sell, whereas in Charlotte, North Carolina, it's taking about 8 days longer, 7 days longer in Cincinnati, 10 days longer in Denver. And look at that, inventory up by nearly 55% there. In stark contrast, I talk about Hartford, Connecticut quite a bit on the channel. Look at this, inventory has only increased by 1.8% year over year compared to the national average up by 25%. And because of this, houses on average are actually selling 1 day faster from 1 year ago. Houses are also selling very quickly in Houston, Texas, 3 days longer compared to 1 year ago. Indianapolis up by 2 days. Whereas Jacksonville, Florida, it's taking about 8 days longer, including Los Angeles as well. Now, going down this list very quickly here, Miami is one of these areas in which houses are taking much longer to sell than 1 year ago, about nearly 2 weeks longer. But look at this, Nashville, Tennessee, 19 days longer, and also inventory is only up by 23%. In contrast, in New York, 3 days faster, but Orlando, Florida, 15 days longer. Philadelphia, 3 days faster, whereas in Portland, Oregon, it's taking about 11 days longer to sell. Homes are also selling faster compared to 1 year ago in Providence, Rhode Island, as well as Richmond, Virginia. Looking at the greater Sacramento area, where of course they work as an agent here, inventory is up by about 34%. And also houses are taking about 6 days longer to sell. I'll provide a link for that article if you guys want to take a look at that, including this article from Redfin, by the way. So I just want to provide some clarification here because, houses taking longer to sell on average does not necessarily pertain to your neck of the woods, right? So anyways, let's just move on. It says here, sales are slow because it's very expensive to buy a house with rates sitting near 7% and home prices up by 4.8%. So I actually look at trends looking at mortgage rates. The average 30-year fixed rate mortgage rate, according to the Mortgage News Daily, has been above 7% ever since mid-December last year. So we have this elevated rate environment, but of course, elevated home prices as well. It says here the median monthly housing payment is just over $2,700 per month, just shy of April's all-time record high. And by the way, the all-time record high is only data going back to 2015 though. Additionally, extreme weather, including snow and frigid cold in the Midwest, the South and Northeast, and fires, of course, in SoCal are keeping would-be buyers at home as well. Now let's talk about rates as of Thursday. The average 30-year fixed rate, according to the Mortgage News Daily, they basically surveyed lenders across the country asking them, hey, if someone's looking to buy a house, they have an excellent credit score, they're putting 25% down, they're looking to buy a house they want to live in other words, not invest in property, what's your average rate? And based on that survey, as of January 30th, that's at 7.05%. FHA and VA is around 6.45%. Now here's a chart looking at the 30-year fix. It has been volatile to say the least. We've had highs about 7.5% back in April last year, and then it decreased to about the low sixes in mid-September this last year. Then we had this upward trajectory, a small dip in mid-December, and ever since then, rates have been more or less above 7% for quite some time. And in fact, looking at the average rate 1 year ago, we're at nearly 6.9%. So rates are approximately 18 basis points higher compared to 1 year earlier. All right, let's talk about some leading indications of home buying demand. Then we'll talk about home prices, inventory levels, etc. So looking at application numbers for people looking to buy a house, they want to buy a house using a loan. Application numbers are down 7% year over year, but virtually unchanged compared to 1 week ago, according to the MBA. Now, meanwhile, Redfin's Home Buyer Demand Index, a measure of home tours and other home buying services from Redfin agents, is down 1% year over year, really close to this lowest level since June last year. Now, looking at data from showing time, looking at activity, looking at agents showing houses to their clients, that's up by only 7% compared to the start this year. At this time last year, it was up by 8% compared to the start of 2024. Google searches for homes for sale is virtually unchanged from 12 months ago as well. All right, let's talk about home prices and a lot more in today's video. If you guys are getting any value out of today's video, then please hit the like button. I really appreciate that. All right, this article covers the 4 weeks ended January 26. They basically look at a 4-week rolling average. I'm going to share Realtor.com's latest updates regarding January's numbers here very, very soon. And when I mean soon, I mean in the next several days. Anyways, looking at this, Redfin looks at 400 plus US metros, and their data goes back to 2015. So the US median sold price is just over $377,000, again up by 4.8%. Asking prices are up by 5.2%. Let's take a look at Redfin's data center, looking at home sold prices over the past several years, going back to 2022. Again, I would really love that they shared 2019's numbers, but Realtor.com does that, and I'll go over that in a separate video. So anyways, we saw this seasonal decrease to start the year. Now we're seeing a kind of an uptick this last week. It's up by 5%. At this time last year, we were also up by about 5% as well. In contrast, at this time in 2023, we were only up by 1%. But look at 2022. At that time, it was up by a whopping 15% when everyone was trying to buy a house then to get a low rate in the low threes and buy a house before rates increase like we saw in late 2022. Of course, home price changes varies quite a bit on the area, right? So looking at this data from Redfin, looking at the 50 most populous metros, there's only 3 metros that decreased compared to 1 year ago. That was San Francisco down 5.6%, Austin, Texas down by 2.6%, and Tampa, Florida down by 1.5%. And I made a video last week regarding San Francisco. The stats in San Francisco can vary quite a bit due to a low level of home sales in the area. San Francisco is only 49 square miles, so a relatively small area compared to larger metros such as the greater Sacramento area, a very big area. So the stats in San Francisco can vary quite a bit depending on the mix in sales. So I don't put a whole lot of weight regarding this decrease down by 5.6%. But again, I went over that in my video posted last week. Anyways, looking at the biggest increases though, I mean, this is astonishing. Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania up by 19.3%. Then we have Milwaukee up by nearly 17%. Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and that's been the top 5 spot for quite some time, up by 14.2%. Newark, New Jersey, also one of these metros, has been up greatly for quite some time, up by about 13%, and Cincinnati up by nearly 12%. All right, let's have a look at pending home sales, a measure of contracts being signed, new listings, a measure of people listing their house for sale, and of course, active listings, the total amount of houses actually for sale right now. So pending home sales decrease year over year, down by 9.4%. That's the biggest decline since September of 2023. Meanwhile, new listings only increased by 2.2%. So we're seeing demand decreasing, but supply increasing at a relatively small pace. And speaking of that, inventory levels were up by 11.3%, but that is the smallest increase in nearly 1 year. All right, looking at Redfin's data center regarding pending home sales, again, that decreased by 9.4%, which is a slightly bigger decline compared to 1 week ago when we were at 9.2%. But to start the year, we were only down by 1.2%. So the decrease compared to the previous year is actually getting a little bit worse. When looking at new listings, we're up by 2.2%, quite the turnaround compared to the start this year. At that time, we were down by 2.1%. When we have a look at active listings, again, that rose by only 11.3%, which is actually much less than the start of the year when we were up by 15%. So basically what we're seeing right now, let me kind of just break this down for you guys, is that we're seeing a decrease of pending home sales, which basically causes inventory levels to increase, right? As houses take longer to sell, we're seeing fewer home sales. That causes inventory levels to increase. However, on the supply side, we're not seeing enough new supply hitting the market. In other words, not enough water going to the bathtub to increase the inventory level, or the water level, which is inventory. So basically right now we're seeing this kind of counterbalancing where the plug in the bathtub is getting plugged up, but water going into the bathtub is also kind of going in at a slow pace. So that's why active listings posted the smallest increase in about 1 year. Of course, this would look a lot different if new listings were absolutely skyrocketing, which of course would cause inventory levels to also skyrocket as well. All right, so having said that, let's take a look at the 50 most populous metros, looking at pending home sales and new supply in the market. This is pretty wild. So there's basically only, 2 metros that were up year over year. This means that 48 of the 50 biggest metros reported a decrease in pendings. So the only increases were Portland, Oregon, up by 9.7%, and Milwaukee, Wisconsin, up by 2.6%. In contrast, we saw big declines down by 20% or more in Miami, Detroit, Atlanta, San Diego, and Houston, Texas. In contrast, new listings increased in 32 of the 50 biggest cities, or decreased in 18 metros. So the biggest increase was San Jose, California, up by 23%, Phoenix up by 19.5%, then we have Seattle, Oakland, and then also Sacramento, California. In contrast, the biggest declines were San Antonio, down by 17.4%, Detroit, Newark, New Jersey, Atlanta, and Warren, Michigan, rounding out the top 5. In regards to the month supply, again, that increased to 5.2 months, the highest level since February of 2019. Also, of course, quite a bit higher compared to the past several years. So for example, last year this time, the month supply was less than 5 months. It was actually at 4.9 months. And in 2023, this time, it was at approximately 4.7 months. So this basically means that we have more or less a buyer's market on a national level because a more balanced housing market has a month supply of around 4 to 5 months. And here we are at 5.2 months. It will be interesting though, because the month supply tends to peak during this time frame, right? Every February, late January, the month supply increases, and then it decreases through the spring home buying season, and then it has a slow uptick in the fall and winter months. So it's going to be interesting to see over the next couple of months here if the month supply also does the same. I'd be shocked if it does not. It should decrease, but the question is, will it decrease kind of going like this, or will it go like this and get below 2024's levels? Redfin also noted that the average sale price to final list price ratio this last week or last month was at 98%, which means out of all the houses that did sell, they sold for 2 percentage points less than the seller's final list price. This is also higher though compared to the same time frame in 2023 though, but lower than 2024 and of course in 2022. With that said, if you guys got any value out of today's video, then please hit the like button. I greatly appreciate that. Again, please consider subscribing as well. I greatly appreciate that. Have an amazing day and we'll see you in the next video.